Yo guys, and we are back for week 1, the official first week of the NPL Majors Power Rankings. We have done our preseason power rankings and now we are into the major season and what a week we have had. Now before we start, me and Phalop have had a different type of, we're going to change up the power rankings slightly. We're going to start off the video with a quick brief recap of each game, nothing too long, maybe like 30 seconds a game, just telling you what happened. Then we're going to go over our rankings, but we're not going to spend no longer than a minute on each ranking. So it's not going to be as in-depth as before. You're not going to be seeing a 2-hour video. You're going to be seeing a quick 30-minute video, which sums up basically almost like a 3-point power ranking. 3 major points per game between each of us on why we think this person deserves to be in this spot. So it's a different type of power ranking. I hope you guys like it. So we'll jump into the weekly recap part, and Phalop, you can start with the first game with Tampa Bay Luxuries versus the ZYGARDE.
Yeah, so this game, it was really close, like a lot of games this week. It ended up being a 1-0 for our boy Mono, and basically what got Mono this far was just the early toxics. He toxicked the Powder, he toxicked the Jellicent really early on, and that gave his more cleaners like Mimikyu and Megalopin some free space later in the game to get the necessary KOs they needed. And also Rob made a little bit of a misplay by not megaing with his Mega Sharpedo in the end, and now it could not take a quick attack, and it died pretty early on. And normally it could have lived the quick attack, and also it could have taken 2 Shadow Sneaks from Mimikyu. I believe this time it might have lived the quick attack, but then died to the first Shadow Sneak. So he could have had a little bit of a chance, but unfortunately he hadn't. So then we have our Phoenix match. So if you want to cover that really shortly.
The Phoenix match was a match of 2 blows. It was a very exciting game, which Brilliant got 5 kills in on Rizzy Power's part, so it was a great prep on his part. The Sunflowers proved that despite losing Excadrill early on with a bit of misprep, they overcame the bulk of Mega Tyranitar and Cheeseboy to come out with a good victory. Cheeseboy is just warming up here. It was a very, very close game, and it could have gone either way coming towards the end of the game. So next up, we're going into the Rush Rams versus Portland Timbers game.
Yeah, so basically Mega Wow really big threat for Maddie, but he got it with an early game prediction with his Carbomb. He had to Hypercard for the Intimidate, and he got a clean KO with the Earthquake, really freeing up some of his other mons, mainly his Hoopa, which got like 3 kills this match, mainly because it also had like the all-out pummeling for that Alone Muck, and then there was not really much the Timbers had for Hoopa to switch in, and then a crit from Blastoise made it a little bit easier for him because the bulk of Tornadus could have maybe have been preserved otherwise. Now it died, and without that late game cleaner and that Revenger, Toke really struggled against most of Maddie's offense, and that eventually led to his downfall. So then we hop into like maybe the weirdest game of the week, which was the Tampa Bay Frogadiers versus the Persians. So you can cover it a little bit shortly, and then we will probably mention it in the power rankings also quite a lot. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it game of the week, but it certainly was the most complicated game of the week, the most in-depth game of the week. It basically featured Verd, who played a very, very good early game against the Persians team, who didn't play an amazing early game, losing a lot of momentum to Verd's team. Verd's KARTANA getting 4 kills, although it doesn't really reflect the weight of the match, as the Florida Persians and top tier boys started to come into the game towards the end of the game. It was unfortunate when his Keldeo was rock slide flinched out, although he has partly to blame for himself where he didn't click that substitute button earlier, which resulted in a 2-0 victory for the Frogadiers in this game.
Yeah, and just to clarify some things, and we will mention it shortly, but that situation only was called because the Mega Pinsir got frozen by a freeze dry. If the Mega Pinsir had not gone frozen, Vert would have won that right there and then with his Mega Pinsir. I believe it would have been a 4-0, but with that freeze, it got a little bit dicey in the end. But we will talk about it more with the power rankings. So then we had like probably the biggest win this week, which was the Shitney Sharpedos versus Newcastle Umbrians. Gypsy pulled out a 4-0 victory versus Ape. Basically, Gypsy had a pretty nice matchup, and he had just really solid prep, which you would expect from Gypsy, and he just got Ape on a few predictions which were just so key in this match. Like he made a triple lead sheet play with Celesteela. I think a lot of people got a hard one from that one. And also he fire punched with his Hariyama, expecting the Mega Scissors to come in, trying to get off Defog, and with nailing that prediction and keeping the heads up, yeah, that pretty much eased up the end game for him. So then we got Toronto versus Houston, probably one of the games of the week, I would say.
I would say this is the game of the week. It was a very, very calculated victory from Joe, as per usual. He took it right down to the wire with some late game rocks, which he smartly played and explained in his video as to why he did it, which helped him get the victory over a offensive or slightly faster, less bulky Tapu Fini set. He used ZANGOOSE much to make Shrimrover proud and to get that victory late on. Against Trev, who did put up a good fight. It was a very good battle on both halves, which we'll get into later on.
Yeah, for sure. And then one of the other ones that was also really close and also a pretty great one, I must say, was San Francisco Red Giants versus the Bayern Munich. So basically a replay of the GPC finals from like one season ago. And this match was a little bit back and forth, but basically Shadi brought quite a lot of like mons with like floats on Heliolist that were banned or choice packs. He had to look a little bit out for Merc's threats, because if he lets Lucario set up, it could basically be over. And he really played around that quite well, which I really liked about this. But mostly it was just in the end when just Merc had a victory with Lucario, and just to smite some salt in the wound, he used the Trick Room Mega Guard to seal up the deal, which was quite nice prep by Merc. And I think overall Merc had just I think probably the superior prep, which carried him on.
And the final game this week was the Baltimore Briberies versus Razor. Now, Moxie this week used ACCELGOR to perfection with his Water Shuriken to clean up late game, as Razor's offensive team was whittled down early on due to lack of switching to his team. Razor strongly over, he opted not to bring Sapsa for Azumarill, and I think that's where his downfall was, and he says that in his own video, but not to take away from Moxie's victory, because Water Shuriken ACCELGOR is a good heat bring, and that was what won him the game.
Yeah, for sure. So now we covered pretty much the weekly recap. We also did this because the other series we have on the channel is around the Ryon, so we don't have a separate weekly recap every week going up. So we will be doing that in this short segment of the first part of our rankings. So now we will hop into our actually rankings. So as you can see, at the bottom 4, a little bit has changed from last week. I think quite some teams remain in the bottom half. I see some recurring teams, mainly the Chicago Bewares I see on both our sides, and also the Bayern Munich. So we'll probably just start off with the Chicago Bewares and what you have to say about them.
Well, I've got them bottom because I think that Razor didn't show much of a threat at all in his game. My sort of 3-point review on Razor is he didn't show much of a threat at all to Moxie in his game. Kept doubting his own prep, which you can't do. You've got to trust the prep that you had, and if there's something wrong with it, you need to work from the beginning. Mark says all the time, prep is 80% of the game, and I think that Chicago Bewares lost it there. I don't think it was just his Azumarill set that lost in the game. You have to commend Moxie because of how good his build was, but we'll talk about that later. I also didn't think his team was completely right. I think it was slightly too offensive. It didn't really have a balanced core around it to stop the Mega Venusaur, because Mega Venusaur is a threat, and he let his Latios go too early. Losing that massive offensive threat early on in the game was a big issue for him, and I think that's why I've got the Chicago Bewares at the bottom, because they simply played the worst out of the lot this week.
Yeah, for sure. I don't agree fully on that one. Just to commentate quickly, I think the BUS actually put up quite a decent fight. Actually, yes, he made some misplays and maybe some misprep, like a bit of a weird Azumarill set, and like letting Mega Latios go down early. It was a bit unfortunate, but the self-destruct was nice prep. But yeah, in the end, basically, Tandy was able to set up. He had quite a nice Tandy set, but ACCELGOR got like 4 hits with the Shuriken, killing off the Tandy. If he did not get 4 hits and only got 2 or 3, Tandy would have been able to kill ACCELGOR, and the game would have shifted tremendously. And also his Entei got critted by the ALOMOMOLA, which otherwise it could have taken down the ALOMOMOLA and even could have potentially done a bit more damage to Blake's team. So I definitely think there was some nice prep for Razor, but in the end he was not able to secure the victory. So then going over shortly to my number 16, and you'll be talking about them a little bit later on, but I will keep it short. Seb for me was already at number 15 last week. He dropped down to number 16 because this week it was just if there was no freeze, and of course there was a freeze, he would have lost in a 4-0 fashion to Vert, who had just a really nice prep with his grass types, which you actually didn't think would do much work, but we will get to that later. But yeah, Seb just, I think it was not, in the early game he's really struggled, and yes, he got a little bit back in the end, and there was some flinch in the end, and it was a really weird game, which I can't go into fully, but just by looking at just how he built and just the prep, I think Vert just outclassed him this week and was able to secure the victory that way.
That's interesting, because I do have some sort of disagreements with what you said, but that's what we're here for. We're here to debate the points, and I'll get to it when I talk about the versions later on. So that's the whole point of power rankings. But I guess I'll jump into both of our 15s. It's the first time we've had a shared spot, which is really interesting. Now, the Bayern Munich, in my opinion, my 3-point review of sort of the game is that Shadi didn't really have a scary mon on his team. He had the Mega Kang, and it was a great set, and it was a set he needed to bring. And despite the close result of the game, Merc was always in control. I think that there was not a point, other than the point where he confused with the signal beam, that Merc wasn't in control of the game, and Merc was dictating what he needed to happen in order to win the game. I think that's the problem with Shadi. He didn't have a mon that's going to gain in momentum. There wasn't anything strong in his team. I think that's an issue with his draft, not his player overall. Shadi, as still a good player, got it to how close it was, despite the fact Merc was in control the whole of the game. So I think that's what Shadi needs. He just needs to revamp something on his draft. Nothing to do with the game itself. He lost to Merc, whose team I didn't really rate, so I had to drop him. And that's just the logic of power rankings.
Yeah, for sure. I agree almost fully on this one. Yes, he brought like Bandit, Floatzel and Specs-Heliolist to get a bit more power, but it also brought some weaknesses with it, because if Floatzel got like locked into Ice Punch, then Lucario could get a free setup, and that might have just swept him right there. And he had to play around that, and he did that quite well actually. That's something I have to recommend. But then, and also I liked Iron Ball Wheezing for the Toxic Spikes. It was a really nice tech. But other than that, it's exactly what you said. He just lacked the break, or lacked the cleaner for the late game, and Merc just had the answers for the mons he brought, and just could bring out his own threats and just clean up the game from there. So then we will going over to your number 14, and I will talk about a bit later, and that are the Gotham City Golux.
The Gotham City Golux this week in their game basically exemplified what I said last week. TA has a very efficient team. Pardon me. It's a very efficient team, but they only do one thing, and one thing very well. Mono exemplified this. Mono played to its strength, just played simply and pivoted around the mons to make sure that none of them could sort of flex and do what they're good at. So he limited the fact they could do that, and therefore the Gotham City Golux got easily crushed. And that's the problem. I think relying on defensive sizzle is never really that reliable, considering I think his Hippo went down semi-early in the match, which it wasn't a good play on his part. Losing that early enough, but I think again the Gotham City Golux team is too one-dimensional. Not making a revolving Sharpedo was a problem, but he wasn't gonna win the game at that point anyway, so it didn't really matter. It was just a differential sort of saving point that he didn't do, and that was a misplay, but he was losing anyway. The main point was his team was a bit one-dimensional, and Mono exploited that completely, and that's why I've got him that low, because it just proved what I said last week.
Yeah, okay. I will talk about it a little bit later, but yeah, then we will hop into my number 13 and shortly your number 13. But first, the Houston Toxapex. So Trev played Jolt this week, and basically Trev had some nice tags like Scarf Tapu Fini, and it's always nice to see an offensive Tapu Fini used in that way. But just overall, Trev didn't play to his full extent, I felt. Like his Scarfini took an early hit with a Volt Switch from Rotom-W, which really hindered him in the end game. He also sacked his Blissey while he could just use like Protect to scout at that point, or just throw up a Wish at that point. But he didn't. He just went for a little bit of chip damage with Seismitoss and lost his Blissey due to that. And then at the end, Scarf Zangoose cleaned up, and he could have played it a little bit differently, that he could save a differential point, but the win was already without, not in his grasp, mainly due to that early game Volt Switch that he let off on his Finny. So overall, I think if Trev improves his playstyle, I think he can definitely improve also with the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's pretty fair enough. I see that. I'll talk about Trevor a little bit later on, but you've said most of the points to carry on. But we're going to enter my number 13, which is the Baltimore Rivalries and Moxie. Now, Moxie, simple enough, played very well, played very efficiently against the Razor. Self-destruct play was a very, very good play on the Snorlax. Okay, Razor could have switched into Fortress, but Moxie did exactly what he needed to do. Snorlax was useless to him now. Self-destruct, got rid of Mega Chaos. Huge, great play there as well. ACCELGOR with the Water Shuriken was a great little bring. Not many people know that ACCELGOR gets Water Shuriken, and now Water Shuriken is a special move. It's just better coverage on it, which is always nice. The only problem is, the only reason I've got Baltimore Rivalries this low is because they started off low for me, and I don't like jumping loads of places in power rankings, and the players I've got above him generally played better than him, or played slightly more difficult games. That's the only reason he doesn't jump that high. Keep playing that well, Baltimore, and you will rise. Simple as that. That's my number 13.
Yeah, I think basically you covered it. And also just, I felt, and this I will talk about also a little bit on Razor's part, that this match could have gone either way. There was like some hacks involved, there were some maybe misplays involved that shifted the game. Like Razor went for spikes with his Fortress. If he went for rocks, that really could have changed the game. The crit on Entei could have changed the game. Just there was a lot of factors this game that could have shifted it either way, and that's why also I didn't put up Moxie that high, because the win wasn't that convincing, but still he brought some nice attacks in the Water Shuriken ACCELGOR, and also just max special attack ALOMOMOLA. You don't see that every day. And then on Razor's part, just one last thing to mention, he brought custom EV spreads, and if you don't know, Razor for almost all season just ran 252 spreads, but this season he's finally going all in, and he's also using custom EV spreads, so props to him.
Yeah, that's classic Razor. He's finally decided to actually do the prayer. No, that's a joke. That's a joke. So we're moving on to our number 12s. If you want to say anything more about Baltimore?
No, I think I covered it in this segment. So we will move on to the Reggie Giants, which you have actually at number 12.
Again, I just said before, I don't like jumping people with that many spaces, and that's why I've got Merc semi-low at number 12, because he was my bottom last week. But Merc did play a great game overall. He had the game in control. The one bit I didn't like was in his commentary, he said he tried to stun, and that almost caused him to lose differential. Although he went back on himself and said it was his best play. You can't have the stun and the best play. Don't quite understand that. I think he was trying to stun, in all honesty, and that lost him a couple of differential points when he could have had a bit more of a reliable victory. Although he played the game in control the whole time, he had Shadi in his back pocket, despite the fact that he knew Shadi couldn't break him out of the situation he was in if he made the correct plays and carried on doing that. That's exactly what he did the whole game. It's classic Merc. He gets his revenge on Shadi, or just continues his winning streak over Shadi, and I think he just needs to keep going and keep rising in power rankings.
Yeah. I definitely see your points right there. But I will carry on to the number 11. For me, that was the Timbers, and like you said you didn't like to move up or move down people quite a lot, but for me it's a little bit different, because last time it was solely on the draft, now it's also just the players and just how I felt everyone performed this week. And for me, Toke was just a little bit lackluster, like that play with Mawile early game, losing his Mega Mawile that early was just really huge for him. Then he even risked his Tornadoes on the Crabominable, which luckily went for the CC that turn, but could easily have gone for the Ice Hammer, and you saw it a little bit later on. It was actually a bulk up Tornado Starion who could have set up on quite some things actually, and bulk up Tornadoes was also pretty scary late game versus Maddie, so I didn't also saw the reason to switch it in like that. And then in the end, he set up like a trick room, but the trick room hurt him more than it hurt his opponent, because Hoopa-Yu got a little bit more scarier, because his best Revenger could not outspeed anymore. So it was a bit dicey also in the end, and I felt like Toke this game could have just played maybe a bit more aggressive and just a few different plays. I felt this was not Toke's best match at all, so that's why he's quite so low. But if he steps up his game, I think that's definitely a huge improvement.
Yeah, I see that. I pretty much predicted a Toke drop on both of our parts, which we've done. I'll get to Toke a bit higher up, because I'll talk my reasons later on. But I've got Bird next to Tampa Vogadis. He's technically moved down for me, but that's because there have been a very high quality of games this week. So just because you won doesn't mean you're going to go up, in my opinion. Verd, I think, played very well at the start of the game. Okay, the freeze basically changed the whole dynamic of the game. but Seb explains this very well in his video. Bird didn't have to do that. He could have 2-hit KO'd with return pretty easily, but he went for the straight 4-0 win with the +2. And some may see that as a more reliable play, but he did set himself up for his chance to get frozen. He could have just gone for the kill. He went for the +2. It happens. I don't think it was a choke because he still won, but like it made the game more difficult than it needed to be. And then from that point on, he started losing the 50-50s that Seb was winning. And then he won through the rock slide flinches when Seb could have subbed up and then won the game. So I think it all roots in that freeze. Okay, it's a freeze. Okay, it's a 10% chance or 20% chance. But he didn't need to let it happen. He could have just broke the Mon that was trapped, broke the ZYGARDE instead of giving it that chance to do that. And I think that's why I didn't move him up that highly or didn't value his victory that highly, because he did something he didn't need to do and it was risky and it almost cost him the game.
Okay, so as Vert is also in this segment of the power range for me, he's at number 9, but still it's a 4 we're now covering, so I will be going over this match. Basically, I don't want to ramble on too much about this match because there's a lot of controversiality going on in this match, and I actually highly recommend you guys to watch both of their sides and also do some research on yourself and then come to a conclusion, because either way both views are from their point and you have to take everything into account. I think the only thing that can be said about Vert was I don't fully agree that with the freeze dye play might have been a choke, but also if he went for the 2-hit KO, could also got a frozen. Yes, Kuno was a bit lower then, but it could have roosted up then because his opponent was frozen, so could have turned out a lot of different ways there. He made some chokes later on though. He forgot about the speed tiers and his KARTANA actually outsped the remainder of Seb's team, and he could have swept right there, but he switched out because he thought he did not outspeed, but he actually did. So that was a bit of a misplay, and later on there was also a misplay he made. Basically just 2 misplays in the end really costed him, and that almost made him lose, but then the rock slide flinches won him the game. But then you mentioned the sub play. The sub play is also a little bit controversial because I think rock slide always put him at like below the 25% range or around, so it was really dicey if he could sub up after the rock slide or not, because the recovery happens at the end of the turn. So really controversial game actually, and I will just leave it at that.
I think you should talk about Rob then, if you've got
Yeah, for sure. So you had him a little bit lower, and you mentioned it also in the preseason that you find his team quite one-dimensional. I think this week Rob brought quite a lot of standard sets and made his team a little bit one-dimensional, but still I like the defense scissor, and I think it could definitely have done some work if maybe played otherwise. And also just his gelatin with Will-O-Wisp was really scary because Mono just did not have anything for Will-O-Wisp gelatin, because the only special attacker was Nicholas, and that does not take on gelatin. So that was pretty nice, but basically letting his Hippowdon and gelatin getting toxic in the early game just costed him in the late game, and that pretty much led to his demise. And I think if he just saw through what Mono was trying to do and tried to prevent that scenario, and then he could maybe have had a shot, but now actually Mono just executed his plan quite flawlessly, and that made him win the game.
Sweet. So I'm going to move on to talk about Matty now. Matty had a great game against Toge. Okay, he took advantage of Toge's misplays, which is just what you got to do in a game. He used Carbonimal like Poke-AM wanted to last season. He used it pretty well, other than the fact that he could have Ice Hammered again on a Taunt-T coming in. Matty wasn't to know that Toge was going to make that an aggressive play, so you can't really blame him on that one. But he used the Super Unbound perfectly. People don't rate Super Unbound as much as they did before in League format, but I think he's going to prove to people that Super Unbound could be a major threat with his team that people slightly doubted. I think Matty is going to have a good season in the season after getting quite a good convincing victory over Togevoir and his Portland Timbers.
Yeah, for sure. So we will now move up to like our number 9s, and I actually already covered it. So for you, the Toxapexians, which I already covered. If you have any words to say about draft or maybe I covered it all.
I think you covered most of it. It's just the fact that if you're going to bring offensive Fini, you need to manage that thing properly. That's probably the one big thing. Offensive Fini is very, very effective and it's a very, very good set, but you've got to manage it. Like it doesn't have recovery. It doesn't have a recovery option. I think it's Aquaring is its most reliable recovery. You've got to manage it properly. You're not running that on a scarf set. So recklessly letting it take fault switches isn't good. And if you've got a Blissey, if you're running Protect or Wish, use it. There's no reason not to scout if the mon in front of you doesn't want to set up. So I think it's just a bit more patience with Trev. It just needed a bit season to warm up. He had a very difficult, hard game, first game up against Jolt, so you can't really blame him. But it was pretty solid performance otherwise. Just manage your mons and warm up, and Trev will do fine this season.
Yeah, for sure. So we will now move up into our actually top 8s, which for me starts off with Maddie Brolick. So he climbed up all the way from last, and as I mentioned in the post-draft power rankings, I already said Maddie is a pretty solid battler and maybe one of the best battlers in the NPL. But just he drafted like more of a fun team. That's why he was so low. Now he proved that even with his fun team he can do exceptionally well. And he just played a really solid game against Toke, and you pretty much covered like everything that he did trying to win. And I think just he had some nice prep and he executed and made plays when needed to with like the Crabominable early game, and that's some really the nice keys to victory. Make plays when you need them and not over predict or anything.
We've talked a hell of back about this game, the Florida Persians. The reason I've got them still at number 8 is because they're reasonably high up for me last week, so I've only dropped them a few spaces because of that loss. I also think they didn't perform as badly as it may look from the offset. You made a great point, is you need to watch with all of these videos, watch both sides. It's the same game, but it's different commentary. You're giving different people support. You can see their points of view. Is very, very interesting. And obviously, we're going into this watching both parts. So it's very, very important to watch both maybe Seb's and a Bird's point of view from this game, because you'll get different perspectives. That's really all I'll leave it with there. I think Seb didn't play as bad as it looked, and he showed in the 50-50s in the end of the game, taking advantage of Bird's misplays, that what he actually can do, and I think that's why I didn't drop him as far as I possibly can, because there was glimmers of 7 there. You could just see he was frustrated.
Yeah, okay, that's all fine. So now the Red Giants, which for me are at number 7, and that's just because they just had a pretty solid win over Shadi, and he pretty much dominated the whole game, and he just knew how he wanted to end this game with Trick Room. But I believe he also explained it quite well actually, that with Trick Room, when the Trick Room was up, he actually had like the 100% win with Lucario, and also just Mega Guard if it was not confused and got a Trick Room up. It also cleaned up by itself, which would have went with a 2-0. So I think was not much to flaw him for that one. And other than that, he played it Celebi quite well, because I think he just kept it in against the Skarmory, while Shadi was just a bit over predicting around the Celebi, thinking it would not stay in and such, but it just stayed in, clicked some attacks and did the damage it needed to do. Also hazards were a solid option versus Shadi's team, seeing that Toxic Spikes could hurt him, and also just hazards in itself. And with the Zapdos, that just to shuffle around Shadi's team, and also does not allow the wish passing as Shadi may have wanted it, really helped his team out a big deal, and just nice prep and a solid performance.
Fair enough, completely there, Scoop thing. Now, the Sunkern have dropped below the Sunflowers on both of us. Sorry, Cheese, but Cheese didn't do much wrong in his game. Like, his game was actually pretty good. He was just outplayed by Rizzy in some senses. Rizzy's team just broke through. The offensive Rizzy's team just broke through the Sunkern. I think the Sunkern potentially sacked the Tyranitar too early, or didn't manage it well enough. But he managed to counter the threat of Excadrill and the potential Sand Rush on the other side, even though he could have got counter-sanded by Rizzy Power, which is really awesome. The Sunkern needed, I think, just a little more bulk in the team, and potentially maybe swapping out the Stoutland for something. Maybe the Manaphy. No, I don't think. Did he bring the Manaphy?
Yeah.
I don't think he did. Oh, did he? Okay, fair enough. Ignore that point. But I think the Sunkern didn't do much wrong in the game. I think that Rizzy's offense just broke him down, so that's why I haven't really moved them too much other than the fact that Rizzy's going above him purely because he won, and that's simple as keep going cheese, you'll be doing alright as well.
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's like one spot above. Still a little bit below Riz, but basically it was quite a back and forth game. Cheese did not do much wrong. Actually, he made in the end some plays to try to get back into the game, because at some point he was a little bit in the back, and he knew with his swallow that Mega Erect was the most obvious switch in, but also so he just clicked the U-turn, Riz went into Mega Arrow, and Cheese shifted the momentum a little bit in his favor, which helped him out from there. But basically in the end the Braylon was able to sweep, but was also able to set up because it dodged the Stone Edge early on in the game, and we won't know what would have happened if the Stone Edge had landed. But I think it might have just shifted the game entirely. We just don't know. But yeah, the SUICUNE played a pretty much a great game and could have definitely even won it. So props to Cheese for his first Gen 7 match to be a quite solid game.
Yeah, so just jumping straight into Rizzy. Rizzy managed his Breloom extremely well and showed... Excuse me. I'm dying here. I'm actually dying. He showed what a threat Breloom can be in draft format, because it does go underrated, it does go under the radar and often not drafted, but I think it got 5 kills this game.
Yep.
Through the team, fighting grass stab, excellent stabs, punch technician boosted, was very, very good against Cheese's team. I think that's something that Cheese overlooked in prep, the threat of Breloom definitely. And it stabs against his team, especially breaking down his core of Heatran, Manaphy, Mega T-Tar, Breloom, and just eats that, just destroys that core if managed properly. I think Rizzy did that. He was very aware at a point where he could have lost the game, when I believe it was Swellow and one other Mon facing up against Riz's. I think he had Breloom and 2 other semi-frail Mons. He knew that the game was on a knife edge, but he managed to manage it towards the victory, and credit to Rizzy Powell. I think he could be in for a very good season this season, taking down a very hard opponent in Cheese week 1. I think Rizzy, if he can get a bit more balance into his team, or if he just likes his team himself, could have a very good season this season.
Yeah, for sure. So basically we're now at the top 5. I think we will just cover the Timbers first, because that's the only team I don't have in the top 5, and the other top 5 is pretty much the same but different spots. So go ahead and talk about them first a little bit.
I was disappointed in Tog this week. I think he just made a few too many misplays. It wasn't like him. He came off last season a victory week 1 against the Sydney Sharpedos, and I was very much expecting him to cause another upset and beat Matty Prolic, but he just made too many misplays. He looked a bit rusty. Maybe the game is rushed, I don't know. That's what it just seemed rushed. I didn't like the more wild play at the start. It was a horrendous play. Sorry, Tog. You don't want to be switching in one of your main win cons or one of your main offensive breakers on an attack that could potentially kill him. That was not a good play. He did manage himself better in the late game, but it was almost lost cause when he lost a couple of key mons early on. I think he'll bounce back, which is why I've kept him relatively high. And I just basically think he'll bounce back. That's why I kept him relatively high. And it's not like Tog to play like that, so I think he'll come back fairly, very standard. But it was horrendous. There was a horrendous more play. You're hurting my soul, Tog. You're hurting my soul. KION. And yeah, I think you're onto the Newcastle Umbra now.
Yeah, which I have at number 5, and we will see momentarily that you have him just one spot above. And basically Ape lost this week, also in a pretty big fashion, but also we both ranked Ape just with his solely based on his draft quite high actually, and he just had a really tough opponent in Gypsy. Like when also just look at the matchup, the matchup was truly pretty bad for Ape. He tried his best, but Gypsy just had really solid prep. Also made some key plays in the game. Normally Ape is the one throwing off some plays, some really good plays, and that might catch his opponent off guard, but Gypsy was just ahead of him, and I think pretty much he could not do that much this game. I think maybe he brought like Sugarberry Nidoking with Stealth Rocks, and I know it was really hard to also fit Toxic Spike on there, but if he could have fit like Toxic Spikes on that team, I think that would have chipped some mons of Gypsy pretty nicely, like that Hariyama that now got a key survive, and also that PILOSWINE. It was also one of the ones that was a little bit in the way of one of his sweepers, like the Mans and the Coco he had in the back. He brought a weakness policy Salamence, and actually if Gypsy had HP Ice on Celesteela and popped that weakness policy, it would have then dropped to like a Fire Blast, and Salamence might have, and that's only if PILOSWINE went down, and I think Gypsy kept it around especially for that Salamence, which was really sold by him. But he definitely had some interesting prep and tried to catch Gypsy off guard, but Gypsy was on his 8th game this week, and Abe stood pretty not much of a chance.
Yeah, I've got Abe at number 4, and I completely agree with you. It's very, very rare that you'll see someone lose 4-0 and not make a misplay in the game. Like, Abe did nothing fundamentally wrong in the game. He just was outclassed by Gypsy, and sometimes you take those, but it doesn't reflect badly on Abe because he didn't make a play that was wrong. He just played a game that Gypsy simply beat him at, and that's fair enough, and that's why I'm not going to be dropping him that far, because he didn't do anything wrong, and against a different opponent, if you play like that, he probably gets a win. So it's just because he played Gypsy week 1. You can't really blame him for that. He didn't really make a misplay. So Abe, keep on going. There's nothing really wrong with your performance this week. But you have Riz up at number 4, so yeah, that's pretty high.
Yeah, for sure, and especially for Riz. But yeah, I think Riz started off this season pretty strongly, and I think the past few seasons Riz always struggled in the beginning, and now I think he got his team sorted out pretty early on. He brought some really nice preps that Sword Dance Braylon was really nice, even had the tech Natural Gift Ice for something like that Mungus, which I really liked about his prep. I think the only prep that was, and he also mentioned itself, if he had Choppel Extra Drill, it could maybe have done a little bit more, because now it died early on to a pretty nice prediction of Cheese with the Megatita. But I think just in the end, when it was really hard to see how the match will go, Riz just kept certain mons in check and just knew how he wanted to end the late game. Just 2 key plays Riz made this game. He always asserted Menifee as a threat, and he also kept it in range of something to clean up. So with Scarf, he went hard into Scarf Gengar because it could always live a hit and could always get off like that crucial Thunder if he went for the Z rain dance, which he did. And with the Z and with that Thunder, it was in range actually of Mag Punch from Breloom, so he handled that threat really well. And then in the end game, he saw that if Stoutland went for like Superpower on the Aerodactyl, which was a pretty nice play because it covered also some switch-ins and was just nice, it hit harder than return. Then it could get an attack drop. With that attack drop, Breloom was able to set up and win the game from there. And I like that really much about Riz. He kept his cool. He saw what plays he needed to make. He made them and he executed his plan, and that's why he's at number 4.
Fair enough. Interestingly, I've got the Toronto Staraptors at my number 3. Now, I famously last week said about Jolt's team being quite awkward. Jolt likes drafting the way he drafts, and he played extremely well with the team he drafted, so fair play to him on that sense. He did beat a good Trev's team as well, although I think Trev did make some fundamental misplays in the game, mainly not scouting and letting his Finny get damaged. But the interesting thing with Jolt is I'm not giving him too much credit too early. He's got 2 games in the next 2 weeks. They're extremely difficult opponents. He's playing 2 of my top 5 in the next 2 weeks. He's playing Rizzy Powell and he's playing the Portland Timberlands in the next 2 weeks. If he picks up 2 wins or even 1 win out of those, he's definitely on the way to getting up. But in terms of this week, he played a great game against Trev. He managed himself really well. The late game rocks were crucial in terms of setting up what he needs to do. They were convenient. He managed the game really, really well. Volt switching on the Finny and basically taking a gamble, getting the damage off on the Finny, helped him later on considering it was modest Scarf, and keeping his Zangoose in the back and allowing it to get clean up and do what Zangoose does best, clean up once the really, really fast mons have gone down, and the things that can't really take a hit or have slightly damaged, just cleaning them up. Jolt did exactly what he needed to do to win. Unfortunately, he's not in the top 2 because there's 2 teams, in my opinion, that played slightly better, but you had Jolt higher last week, so that's fair enough. Yeah. You can go into your number 3, which is the Tapu Velox.
Yeah, so I have Mono at number 3, and last time I had him at number 8, and it was like, for me, the team was quite average, but I knew it was a very Mono-like team, and he executed that this week pretty well, I must say. He just knew, and he always loves to run Toxic, he knew that if he just could Toxic the Hippowdon, could Toxic the Jellicent, his mons like Megalopin just had a much easier time, and he executed that quite perfectly in the beginning, just with like the Tyranitar, which was able to get off one of those Toxics, because Rob pretty much thought, okay, can switch in my Hippo here because it does not do much to me. He's burned. Getting off the Toxic was just really huge and helped him pretty much in that late game. And yeah, he basically executed his plan pretty nicely. And then with the Mimikyu and the Lopunny in the back, he could just clean up. I think the only little bit of downside, and that's not on his prep or just how he played, but just on his team in general. He has a lot of physical attackers, so he is really prone to moves like Will-O-Wisp, which we saw this week. And yes, Reuniclus could have taken it because it was now from a ghost type like Jellicent. You won't 1v1 a Jellicent with Reuniclus most of the time. You might, but not most of the time. So that's the only small spot on it. But other than that, he executed his plan just near perfectly.
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, Mono must have heard that the little man then Septile MC is looking to get promoted into the majors because he stepped his game up hugely. He played a near perfect game against Rob. Again, the only sort of nitpick was the fact that his team was very, very physically biased and was susceptible to Will-O-Wisp, and a Jellicent set was pretty good on Rob's part. His management of Mon, he's very, very comfortable with in Reuniclus, was excellent this game and allowed him to break through the team, Rob's team, and just basically clean up at the end. He always seems so casual and calm when he does his narrations, and that's really, really important. I think it's a really good thing about Mono is he sort of just breaks down everything really calmly, and I think he plays like that too. And it showed once he got over the Mega Sizzle, he had the game won, and not Mega Sizzle, normal defensive Sizzle. He had the game won after the Sizzle, and the Hippowdon was toxic because the key to breaking down Hippowdon is to get a toxic on it because it's got no way of relieving it if you don't have a Cleric, which Rob didn't. So that's great play from Mono. I'm expecting big things from him this season, considering how well he did in Minors, and the fact he's got a big name in George Septile MC looking up at him, looking for blood. So that could be really interesting. But we have a joint number one. Last week you said you weren't going to give it to him too early. You've watched one battle and you've already given it to him. Talk to me about Gypsy.
Yeah, so first I will really shortly mention Jolt because he's my number two.
Oh, sorry.
I got it reversed now. Basically two things you did not mention just yet, which was just, again, a really solid prep by Jolt, and Jolt always has some nice prep, which was Tectonic Rage Terrakion, which hugely damaged the Mega Gallade, and then he just finished it off with a nice quick attack. Always nice to see something like that. And then also he had a Scarf Swampert because Trav's Earthquake Resist is a Yuxi, so that was pretty nice for him. So that was mainly the two things you did not cover, and the other things you pretty much go on. He played a pretty solid game. And now our joint number one, and that's our Gypsy King, our two-time champion. And basically he just had really solid prep, a bit of matchup also in his favor, and just he played near perfectly. As I mentioned already in our weekly recap section, he made a triple lead sheet play that actually worked out, and that was just beautiful. And also that late game prediction with catching the Mega Scissor with a Fire Punch was also pretty nicely. I think even if Ape did not went hard into his Mega Scissor, even the Fire Punch would have done enough damage that he could still manage the threat that was right in front of him, which was Tapu Koko. Because Shuka Tapu Koko was a little bit scary. I think that was the only thing it could have maybe put a dent into Gypsy, but he managed it quite well actually with just his mons that he still had in the back. So yeah, I think it was a calculated risk which really paid off for him, and that meant quite an easy end game actually.
You say calculated risk, and I think that's a really, really important point. Gypsy's playstyle, people have to understand, is that he thinks about every single scenario that could happen, works out his most optimal play according to all the scenarios, and usually is his most optimal play because by pure logic, if it's the best play possible you can make, you will come out on top in that situation. And that's what Gypsy does most turns, and that's what he did every turn this game, and that's why he won the game 4-0, despite the fact that Ape played fairly well. It's because he made the optimal play every turn, and that won in the game. And that's how you win games of Pokemon. You saw Zazo is a very, again, he does it, he did it, Gypsy does it. You think about the plays, you make the play that's the best possible play in your situation. That's exactly what he did. I love how Gypsy's using Hariyama. Gypsy exposing Stunfisk, now he's going to expose Hariyama. Sort of undiscovered little gem in draft format as well. It's a great early management of the Nidoking, and then obviously up to 5 punch on the Scizor as well. Gypsy just showing a really, really strong showing with a sort of very Gypsy-esque squad, which I really, really like. So I think people are gonna be struggling to beat Gypsy this season, but I can't wait for Jolt versus Gypsy. I can't wait for Mono versus Gypsy. They could be very, very good games as well. But I think that's going to bring our Week 1 power rankings to a close. If you do like the shortened version, make sure you tell us in the comments below. Or if you have your own opinions, it's shortened version in inverted comments. I have no idea how long this actually is.
Way too
long.
long.
I'm gonna give some time. Way too long. Great. We're working on it. We're trying to get it shorter. But make sure you
will make it shorter.
And we must stress, watch the videos. Don't just watch this. Go and watch the videos. They are a great watch. Phalop, you can close it now?
Yeah, so definitely check out all the battles, which will be posted every Sunday. This will go up every Friday. And as Turbo also mentioned, we will try to work on the length. It's really lengthy again this week, and we really apologize for it. This new type of power rank is also new to us, and we both really like to talk, which you have actually noticed from those two power rankings. But we will eventually, hopefully in 1 or 2 weeks, bring it down to 20 to 30ish minutes. But for now, it stays around 45 for 50 for now. So I hope you watch it all, or at least watch the favorite part you want. And I think that's it for us. Check out the NPL, check out everyone, and that's it. Bye.
Peace.